Here's another brand of story from my past. How I discovered manga. I think a lot of people have heard my story about how I got into anime. How I, saw Ninja Scroll, how my cousin got this magazine that I read, we watched Adult Swim all the time, I got into the internet. Like, I've told that story a few times, but I don't usually tell as much about how I got into manga. Because I was already into anime for like 2 years before I even found out about manga. Like, I had no idea it was a thing, because the Anime Invasion magazine didn't really put much emphasis on it. It was mostly about just anime, and maybe if it did mention manga, I just didn't know or understand it. Like, I didn't get what it was talking about. And it wasn't until Shounen Jump started coming out, the monthly Shounen Jump magazine, which hit like fucking wildfire where I lived. I was living in Newport News at the time, and like, the fact even that there was anyone in my school who was reading it was, like, amazing to me. Because, I'd been into anime for a couple years, and nobody ever knew what the fuck it was. Like, I could never talk to anybody about anime. And I was used to, at this point, the things I liked being stuff that nobody else knew. Because I was a big Nintendo fanboy when Sony was big and stuff like that. But, like, I saw other kids reading Shounen Jump, or, like, drawing pictures out of it and stuff like that. And that was a big shocker to me. But yeah, I picked it up from, I think, volume 3, or issue 3 rather. So very early into Shounen Jump's run, because the one I had the first chapter of Naruto, and I think it was Naruto on the cover, if I remember correctly. Because, like, the magazine had started off with, like, 5 or 6 series running in it, and then they were adding one, like, each issue. So, like, they had added Shaman King, they had added... Maybe the one I had was the first chapter of Shaman King and chapter 2 of Naruto. That might have been it, because they had added in Naruto, then they added in Shaman King, and something else, and those were, like, the... in One Piece. I don't remember if One Piece was in the original run, or if it was added in. But, like, those were all the ones that came dispersed in those first few issues. I want to say they did that, like, if this is what they did, it's fucking genius. That they were doing it so that if you missed volume 1, you would still be at the start of some series. Like, you would still pick it, like, if you were on issue 3, you'd still be at the beginning of at least one manga. And that would inspire you to want to read the other ones and shit like that. Which, yeah, great tactic, if that's what they were doing. And it picked up steam really quickly. So, yeah, I remember I had issue number 3, and I had read it cover to cover, and I was like, what is this fucking magic? And I think I picked it up because of the fact that, it had Yu-Gi-Oh! In it, and Yu Yu Hakusho, both of which I had been a big fan of, and DBZ, which I knew. I wasn't as big a fan of DBZ, but, like, the fact that it had Yu Yu Hakusho and Yu-Gi-Oh! Was enough for me to be, like, excited about it. Because I had never heard of this idea that these shows had a comic that they were originally based on. And Shounen Jump very smartly made that, like, the point of the magazine, was, like, to tell you, this is the original. This is where these shows you love come from. Like, if you like Yu-Gi-Oh!, here's where it started. And it was especially cool because they started from the beginning. So the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, for those who don't know, there's a lot of stuff that happens before it becomes a card game series. And there was originally an anime. There was a 23-episode original Yu-Gi-Oh! Show that covered most of the stuff up until the Duel Masters arc, which was just not adapted by 4Kids. They just cut that whole part of the show and went straight to the card game section. And so the manga, I was reading it as a kid and being like, what the fuck is all this shit? Like, what's all this crazy stuff going on before the Duel Masters even get started, And reading Yu Yu Hakusho, very similar story. Yu Yu Hakusho starts off with 3 volumes of Yusuke working as a spirit detective for Botan, where they're just kind of doing episodic ghost storylines, and, like, it had nothing to do with what would eventually become. And the anime adaptation, this wasn't even a localization thing, the anime adaptation just straight up cut that all out. They just cut out most of the Spirit Detective arc and just started, like, they left in the necessary elements and got to the action as fast as possible. So, like, yeah, it was a bit of a mind blow seeing these in this magazine. And Naruto and One Piece and Shaman King did not have anime adaptations in the West yet. Like, they existed in Japan, but none of them had come over here, and I didn't know about them. So, you know, these are all manga that, like, I'm getting way into. Like, what actually killed Naruto for me was when the anime started. I had 12 volumes of Naruto, the manga, and then the anime started, and I just kind of completely lost interest, because I really didn't like the adaptation. I really hated the dub, and I was losing interest in the manga anyways, and I just never read any more of it. So, you know, but this was a big deal. It was like, manga. Whoa, what the fuck is this? How could this have been underlying this entire time? It's kind of like, I mean, I've had revelations like this all throughout being an anime fan, and I think it just comes with the territory of researching something and getting deeper and deeper into it, especially when you don't research it all at once. Like me, I've never been somebody who like sat down one day and said, I'm gonna learn everything about anime history. I just kind of pick stuff up over time, and I go, what the hell is this? How did I not know about this? Like recently with the Toei films, like the starting with Hakujaden all the way up through like the 80s, you know, in 1958 through the 80s, like Toei used to make yearly films that are like the most important anime films, that are like the ones, like the first color animated films, and they're like all these really famous, influential movies, you know, that launched the careers of like Isao Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki. I'd never heard of those until like last year, maybe 2 years ago, and it's a huge part of anime history. And I'm sitting here like, I've been into anime hardcore since 2001. How the fuck did I not know about this? You know? But it's not in the popular consciousness. You'd have to be researching anime to find it. And like, my anime research is very splintered. I get interested in stuff nobody else cares about, you know? I see some director who nobody ever mentions, and I go through their whole fucking filmography and get like, you know, way into them and stuff like that. So, yeah, like, I did not know about manga for the first 2 years, because even though I was a hardcore anime fan, I didn't have the resources to like find that out. And Shounen Jump thankfully put it right in my face, you know, and this kind of what started the big manga craze that went for the first few years of the 2000s, like that and Tokyo Pop, because Tokyo Pop started releasing just everything, like any fucking license they could pick up, they would release. And they released tons of dog shit manga, and they also released tons of dog shit American manga, and it was really bad, and they fucking polluted the pool and cannibalized themselves, as they put it themselves. Like, that's what tanked their company eventually. And then you had Viz, who was doing the Shounen Jump thing, and like, they were putting a lot of effort into like how they marketed the American Shounen Jump manga series. They did a fucking genius job. They did a great job with that. And like making the Shounen Jump manga all $8 instead of $10 so that kids could buy it. Fucking genius. So yeah, they did all that so they could proliferate manga, so that they could make it a bigger deal. And this is what everyone needs to learn how to do in the anime industry, is that if you want to make more anime fans, you have to make it easy for them. You have to lead them in. And Shonen Jump did such a fucking genius job of leading kids into manga by giving you a monthly magazine and like telling you how cool it is and getting it in all the shit. Like every store had it, you know, you could easily buy fucking Shonen Jump at Walmart, you know, and it told you what manga was, and then you could buy the actual volumes for $8. It was a fucking genius plan, and it worked for a little while until the internet happened and print media completely collapsed, and all the manga places had to totally restructure themselves. I mean, Viz is still healthy and alive today, but, you know, it was still a good job. I had to stop recording right in the middle of doing this this particular segment, so I'm just going to try to remember what I was saying. The Shonen Jump took over, blah, blah, blah. I got into manga through that, and then the first manga I bought was King of Bandits Jing, which is a really interesting, bizarre series with really cool artwork by Yuichi Kumakura. I think I talked about it briefly in the old-ass Anime Cast finale, but, yeah, I remember it being the first manga volume that I bought, and I think it was even for my birthday. Something like that. It might have been for the same birthday I got a Game Boy Advance SP. And I was pretty into it, and I ended up collecting the whole series eventually, which is rare for me. I don't think that's probably true of any other manga that I was reading at the time. I know the first manga I got, like, really into, because, like, Jing, if I remember correctly, was slow to release, so I only had the first volume for, like, a really long time. But the first manga that was, like, coming out relatively frequently that I was keeping up with was Rave Master. And I was definitely a big fan of Rave Master, but I got 10 volumes in and it started to go downhill, and I just kind of lost interest. And not long after that, Naruto. I was really into Naruto, had 12 volumes of that, and kind of fell off the wagon, as I mentioned before, when the anime started. And I never was, like... I was never as into manga as anime, partly because I mostly read it through Shounen Jump. Like, I would mostly just read those compiled volumes as opposed to buying individual ones, just because I only had so much money and I would rather spend it on anime, you know. But once the digital age came along where you could read manga online, you know, there was access to way more, but it's doubly a problem of, like, the stuff I want to read is not often the stuff that gets scanslated, and also, like, I don't really like reading stuff online, period. So that's why it's only more recently that I've gotten really into reading manga, because I have enough money that I can just buy it all the time. And since I don't buy anime anymore because I fucking hate owning Blu-rays, I just spend all my money on manga. So that's yeah, that's what I end up doing. Anyway, that's it about my history of manga. I was almost done with the point before, but I just had to get up for a while.